Welcome, everyone, and thank you for joining us this Friday. It's always a pleasure to see everybody on Friday. Um, I am your host, Igor Akpovo. I'm joined today by my colleague, David, who will be helping me facilitate. We'll be watching the chat. Um, Please note that this session will be recorded and will be available on our website next week. Um, I am going to ask David to share a few announcements and then hand it over to Dr. Johnston to introduce today's guest speaker. David?
All right, thank you, Igor. So I'm just going to share my screen. We'll go back to our presentation here, and we'll just go over just a few things that we'll share for today. And just a couple of announcements here. We have a team here. We are here to help you through this process. And for the sake of time, we're not going to introduce everybody, but our online learning team is, most of us are here today, and we're happy to help if you have any questions after, or just throughout the semester if you have any questions about your online courses. And if you can, in the chat room, if you could all just introduce yourselves, that would be great, so we can all kind of see who's here today. That would be wonderful. And we just have one announcement here in digital learning, and we have an online community of practice on February 20th. There's a great speaker. It's me, just kidding. I'm going to be presenting on artificial intelligence and writing and using it for writing assignments and brainstorming projects. So hopefully some of you will be able to attend during that session. All right, so I'm going to kick it off to Dr. Jason Johnson, who will introduce our guest speaker today.
Thank you, David. Thank you, Igor. These are always great events, but we have a very special event today because we have Dr. Andrew Feldstein joining us. Thanks for being here, Andrew, for being willing to come and to do this. Dr. Feldstein is the Assistant Provost for Teaching, Innovation, and Learning Technologies at Fort Hays State University. So he leads a team of instructional designers, technologists, professional development specialists, focused on delivering meaningful learning experiences that reflect real-world contexts and promote student agency. And a big reason why we asked him to come here today is because he also utilizes educational technology in general to help increase student engagement, but specifically he uses something called Inscribe that we have started to use here to help with that student engagement. And so we are really curious about his use of that, his experience with Inscribe, the good and the bad, and just how he was able to kind of move it forward. So I got to know Dr. Feldstein through a presentation that we did together at OLC, and I really both appreciated his insights into how to really draw students into community online, but also I just really appreciated his way of looking at how to just in general how to serve our students better online and to really help them become the best that they can be. So with all of that, I will pass it over to you, Andrew. Thank you.
Thank you, Jason. And thanks everybody for being here. All right, so first of all, if you at any point during when I'm talking have questions or want to talk about something, please let me know. I'm not a fan of monologues, but I will start out. I'll start with a story, and I don't know if Jason, if you had shared the case study that Inscribe had put out with folks, but I'll start where a lot of things kind of started, which was back in 2020, and that little thing called the pandemic that maybe had a small impact on all of our lives. So back in May of 2020, having gone through that first semester from March until May, that we all sort of struggled through emergency remote teaching, we sent out a survey to students. And the survey obviously went out to all of our students. And we asked a lot of questions about whether, how everybody did, most of the questions were based upon, were we able to have your courses remaining consistent? Were we able to deliver learning to you? And by and large, but both our face-to-face students and our online students agreed that we did a pretty good job, which was nice. But one of the things I did as we were building the survey, I included a question which I'll paraphrase as, no, really, tell us how you did. And it was an open-ended question. And it was through that question that we got most of the insights. Oh, I'm going to step back for a second and say, just to give you a little understanding of Fort Hays, in terms of our student population, we have 3 primary groups of students that we serve. We serve about 4,000 students on campus here in Hays, Kansas, which is in western Kansas, which is nowhere near much of anything. We can get in the car and drive on Route 70 and head west and be in Denver in about 5 hours, and we can head east and be in Kansas City in about 5 hours. But so we have 4,000 students here. We have approximately 8,000 students online within Kansas and around the world. About 60 some odd % of the online population actually is in Kansas. Then we have another group of students who have pretty much been face-to-face in 2 partner universities in China. It was at those 2 partner universities back in January of 2020 when we were told that our faculty wouldn't be returning to China to teach students on campus because there would be no on campus in 2020. And, we sort of shrugged at one another at this point and said, wow, only in a place like China could they decide to shut down the entire educational system and send everybody home, right? But anyway, so we had, with these 3 populations, the population in China was the first one to go online. And then in March, obviously, everybody else went online for emergency remote teaching. But back to this survey, we asked our students, about their experience through the pandemic. And what we found, looking at the difference between our face-to-face and our online students, that there was a significant difference in their responses. The majority of responses that we received were heartfelt responses from students that were talking about how isolated they felt, and talking about how lonely they were, and talking about their lack of motivation, and talking about depression, and I mean, it was heart-wrenching to read those responses. And then we started looking at the responses from our online students, 36% of whom in this survey said, nothing much changed here. And so first response was, oh, good, nothing much has changed, until we sort of realized the implications of that, contrasting that to the loneliness being expressed by our online students. So we kind of realized at that point that we had been in many ways underserving our online students all along. Because if nothing had changed when we moved into a pandemic and everybody was locked in their houses and things, for one group, whereas the other group was feeling this incredible sense of loss, that's a problem. And it was at that point that we started to think about, not just during a pandemic, but outside of the pandemic, how do we better help our online students connect with us and connect with their fellow students? It was that point that we had reached out to Inscribe, and we built a a community that we call Tiger-2-Tiger. We're all tigers here in Hayes, Kansas. And so the concept of this community initially was to be a space for students. And I do have a slide deck here, so let me pop that on and we can talk about that a little bit. As we were conceptualizing the Tiger-to-Tiger community, we were looking at it not as something that was a within class community, but sort of an around class community. It was designed as a community for students to reach out and talk to one another, sort of like the typical third space interactions that our face-to-face students have when they are, we all know that our students talk to one another when they're not sitting in our classes. And sometimes it's just before class, or sometimes it's just after a lecture. When they turn to one another and say, what the heck just happened? Sometimes it's that, they meet each other walking across campus or in the line at Starbucks, but they have these opportunities to connect with one another. They also, and they have these opportunities and they take advantage of them because they sort of know one another in ways that our online students don't get to know one another. If you're in a class together, even if you haven't spoken with some of the other students in the class, you see them, you see their reactions, you see if the instructor is in a lecture and somebody looks puzzled across the room, you know that somebody looks puzzled across the room because you can see that in their body language. You can smile at each other, say hello to one another, nod at one another. All those things add up to the beginning of having a sense of trust, having a sense that you'll take the risk of talking to someone from your class because there's a commonality that happens. Our online students don't necessarily get that. Most of their work is done in isolation. And even when we were on Zoom and emergency remote teaching and they were all in their own little boxes, they were in fact all in their own little boxes. And they didn't have much of a chance to react outside of the formal things that were taking place. So we thought about those things, and we thought about how it was that we could actually get to create something like that for our online students. How can we create a space for them where they could comfortably interact with one another in a way that they could ask the type of questions that they wouldn't ask in a class, that they could get to know one another a little bit. And so that was the beginning of our creating the Tiger-to-Tiger platform. So we started working on that in late 2020 and launched it in early 2021. But one of the other things that we wanted to do, and we did at the end of 2021, was a follow-up survey from the one we did in 2020, because as we recognized and understood that our online students weren't really connecting, we wanted to get more of a sense of how they connected and if they connected. And so a follow-up survey in 2021, we asked this question, which was, during a typical semester and outside of required course activities, how many classmates do you typically connect with to discuss course-related subjects? Top group was our on-campus students, who only 23% said they didn't connect with anybody. But when you looked at our online students, 61% said they didn't connect with anyone. We were struck by that number. But it's more than that, because when I showed this to various people across campus and our leadership team, one of the things that I was struck by was that I got a response from many that was, well, our online students are just in this for their degree. They don't want to reach out and connect to anybody. They're here, they want to do their work, and they want to get out of it. And I will acknowledge that that is true for a percentage of that population, but it is not true for the entirety of that population. There are some students, regardless of whether there are online students or regardless of whether they're face-to-face students, that are going to get through the course no matter what we do. They are driven. They are going to, if we decide to send a note out to our students in week 2 saying, hey, I'm out of here. I got things to do this semester. You're on your own. These maybe 3 out of 30 students in your class will get through your class anyway. But it's the other 27 we need to worry about. It's the same thing here. We cannot assume that all our online students are transactional. In fact, particularly for a campus like ours in Western Kansas, we are a regional comprehensive institution, and one of our primary responsibilities as stewards of place here in Western Kansas is to help our students for whom going back to school and getting a degree and getting a better job and getting a career, getting a life that's more than what they have now is a moonshot. And we know that in isolation, I'll go back to thinking about, that if they are, let's say, an online student and they're watching a recorded lecture, and halfway through that recorded lecture, they understand one thing. And what they understand is that they're not understanding this lecture. And some of the talk that goes through their head at that point, because they think of this whole thing as a moonshot anyway, is, well, you know what? This was a bad idea. I'm really not up to this. I can't understand this. I'm done. And we can lose students like that because they have no one to talk to. In a classroom, they can look around the classroom. They can see that half a dozen students in their view don't get it either. And they can take comfort from that. And outside, when they leave the classroom, they can talk to those other students and say, hey, I didn't understand that. I saw you didn't either. Or they could reach out to a student who's nodding their head and say, I didn't understand that. Can you help me? But they're not going to do that online because they don't have the relationships with the other students. They haven't been able to build those connections, so we can lose those students. So we need to understand that our online students do need that same type of connection. One of the other things we did in that same survey from 2021 is we included a version of the Community of Inquiry survey. And I'm not sure how many of you are familiar with Community of Inquiry, but we based a lot of our online development on the 3 basic presences within that, which are teaching presence, student presence, and cognitive presence, which are simplified, go back to the 3 basic types of interaction, which are student to student, student to instructor, and student to content. But what we found in this survey was fascinating, because in connection with that last question we asked about how many other students did you connect with, we found very simply that if students didn't connect with one another, they had a less favorable opinion of how their instructor did. In other words, their scores on teaching presence, whether did your instructor facilitate understanding? Did your instructor keep students engaged? Did they provide timely feedback? All those scores were lower for students that didn't connect with other students, which we thought was fascinating. And so student connection is important, not just for belonging, not just for them, feeling that reinforcement, but also for an understanding of how well their instructors were performing. So lots of different pieces here. So for creating the community, the Tiger-2-Tiger community, we wanted to create an inviting community. We wanted to encourage students to talk to one another, exchange ideas. And because of this, we positioned this community in our Blackboard University institution page. But it was placed in that landing page for students. It was not placed in that landing page for instructors. And the reason was because we wanted this to be a place for students. Now, it wasn't that we were banning instructors from participating in the community, but we were hoping this was a place that students would go and students would be comfortable. So we placed it there. The other reason we placed it in that landing page in Blackboard is not just because we wanted students to be able to link in directly, which they were all able to through our single sign-on, but because we wanted to signal that while this was meant to be a informal communities where students could sort of hang out with one another, we also wanted to frame it within the context of the scholarly endeavors that they would be, participating in on Blackboard. In other words, we wanted to sort of signal this was not meant to be a dating site or anything. This was an informal community within their academic community. And pretty much it has worked out that way. This is the interface. This is what the community looks like. And we built this, Inscribe, who hosts this community, worked with us to build the community based upon what we were looking for. Now, you all may be looking to do something different. We can build communities, they can build communities within classes as well for various types of classroom discussions. But again, I was looking to build something here that was that allowed students to talk freely and more informally. And if you look at the structure of this, you'll see that pretty much all of the pieces here are the same types of pieces that you'll find when you're in pretty much any social community. You'll see places to search. You'll be able to sort by topic. You can add resources. You can start conversations. You can like other people's posts, react to other people's posts. We see things like likes and comments and views, and all of these things are things that we're able to look at and see where students are participating and how they're participating. Now, one of the things I want to mention at this point, because we've had a lot of people ask us this since we've begun this community, which is the question of, well, are you sure this is really a good idea? You allow the students to be out there on their own. It's going to be chaos. Things are, what are they going to be talking about? What happens when online fights break out? And I will tell you that since March of 2021, when this community launched, this isn't something we've had to deal with. This has been a civil community. The students have and two basic ways that students have used this community. One has been to ask very specific questions about things that are happening within their courses or things that are in fact course related, but also the other group of students are looking for support and more emotional support, and both of those things are happening. But we have not experienced any real negativity in this community, which has surprised a lot of people. It gratified me certainly, because it really has been a boon for the students. Again, here is where this is our Blackboard landing page, and you can see that we have the communities laid out here. a direct link in. If they are within Blackboard, they just click on the link and they're taken directly in. One of the other neat things is that once they're in the community, they can, in fact, if they download the Tiger-2-Tiger app, they have access to this community without going through Blackboard, and they can just be on their app. If they start a conversation, they will be notified if somebody responds, if somebody likes it, and they can get to those conversations, whether they're on the app or whether they log in to the community. So it's a really nice, seamless community. We have access to what's going on in this community. So we can see the type of activity. What we're looking at is member visits. This is current data. We're looking at January 8th to 2 days ago when I pulled this. And what we're seeing here is that the line I have on the 16th was the first day of classes. And so we're looking at visitors ranging from first day of classes. We had 400 and some odd visitors on the site. It sort of trends down towards the weekend. It popped back up on the 25th. But within this community now, we have 1,181 active members, 69 new members since the beginning of January, and 13,000 item views, 19 new conversations, and 100 new posts in that period of time. So we're seeing some healthy interactions, a lot of students, and you know, we've not done a lot of advertising. One of the things that we wanted to do from the very beginning was let this community sort of grow organically, and it has done so. There were a couple of events that were being put on by our FHSU online group. There was National Distance Learning Day, which occurs, I think, in November, and they've put on events in the community and had contests for people to connect, and they would send out prizes and things. But for the most part, we felt that building it organically would build a stronger community, and we would get a sense of what the students wanted to do and how they wanted to interact within the community. This was from National Online Learning Day 22, and people are, these are the types of posts that we're seeing. How do you manage your time? Which is a huge thing. And, you know, we've got a single mom here, full-time employed, full-time online student. This is pretty much the demographics of our online student population, who are primarily female, primarily mid-30s, although that age is dropping. They're married, they have kids, they have jobs, and yet they're going back to school. And it's beautiful to be able to have this community where they can actually share tips and, you know, for, okay, how do you deal with this? And what we see this as in a way is a retention tool for people that can get tips and tricks from other students as to how to be more successful. And maybe even if they share that I'm struggling too, it still gives them a sense of somebody else is out there that is sharing my experience. Because otherwise, without this, they have this, you know, sometimes they, through self-talk, they're thinking I'm the only one. Everybody else has this figured out. Other people know how to do this, it's just me. And that's a bad avenue to go down. So having the ability to share these things is really, really important. This was a comment that came in early on in this community, which was the sentiment, maybe I'm too old, which was expressed by one of our online students. it was in fact a cry for help. And what was really beautiful about this was the support from the community that was instantaneous. This was feedback that she got from the rest of the students who were in this community saying, you know, you're not too old. The comment over here is someone sharing that, you know, I'm 52 years old. I'm finishing my bachelor's after 6 years. And she went on to talk about this. Somebody else said, I was thinking about asking the same question. And, you know, the comments, some days I feel like my head will explode. These are, while they're, you know, you can look at them saying, you know, this is not a great thing to, but the fact that they're sharing these things and they're sharing these experiences and realizing that they are not alone, I've got to think that if we saved one student from dropping off the face of the earth through this conversation alone, it's worth the price of admission for the community. But I really think that this is just one example of the types of support that our students are able to give one another within this context. One of the other important pieces of this, and because we can track analytics and we can track views in this community, within a few hours of this particular post going live, there were 20 comments, 20 reactions to that comment of people responding. But there were also, within that short period of time, 335 views. So as you all know, in most social network communities, more people look than create content. And so it was wonderful to have those 20 reinforcing responses for the student. But it was also extremely meaningful that within that same period of time, there were 335 views of that response, meaning that it was a much more far-reaching influence than just the people that responded. So as we look at, and these are old statistics, I should have updated these and I apologize, but when I created this back in late 2021, there were 287 questions that had been posed by students to one another within the community, and there were over 44,000 views, which is an average of 156 views per post. So while we're not, you know, people may say, well, it's only 20 responses, whereas if you're in Instagram or something, you may get lots more. But the power here is that students that may not be yet comfortable in diving in and asking questions or responding to someone else's questions, they're there and they are looking, and they're also benefiting from being able to see these conversations that are taking place. I'm going to switch gears for a minute, talk a little bit about social belonging. Social belonging is a tricky concept. In 2022, this was November of 2022, we put out another survey to our student population. And this was a combination of asking them questions about social belonging, asking them questions about connection, but also asking them questions about their usage in our Tiger-2-Tiger community. But we found this interesting information. Basic social belonging questions, and you'll find these questions in a lot of places, including on the NESE survey. When we asked our students these questions about whether they felt they belonged at Fort Hays State University, 82% of our on-campus students and 81% of our online students agreed that they belonged to Fort Hays State University, which was pretty amazing. And I think it really shows what a good job we've doing of indoctrinating our students to feel that they're part of the family and they belong. But if you go past the basic belonging questions to more about the questions of connectedness, are you feeling connected to other students? Are you comfortable reaching out to other students? 70% of our on-campus students agreed with that, but only 47% of our online students agreed with that. And I would submit that connection for their day-to-day work and for their ability to get the support that they may need from one another, from their faculty, from the staff, it's the connection piece that's more important. And so I think it's important that we look at that and understand that it's not enough to tell them that they belong and for them to believe conceptually, yeah, we belong, we're Tigers. It's to be able to set up systems like Tiger-to-Tiger that are going to allow them to connect with one another. And of course, Tiger-to-Tiger is only one piece in a system where we also have to encourage the connection with their instructors and in some ways make our faculty aware that this type of connection is important. And going back to what I was talking about earlier with transformational versus transactional students, that a large percentage are transformational students. They need help. If they have a question about an assignment, the old I'll respond to you in 48 hours really in most cases is not going to cut it, because those students need, they want to know now, whatever now can be. In 48 hours, they may have given up. So Tiger-to-Tiger is one step in building a network of ways that we can connect with our online student population. This was a survey from that same survey where our students using the Tiger-to-Tiger network and them feeling that it made them feel more connected to their peers, added value to their Fort Hays experience, provided useful Fort Hays information, and they were satisfied with that experience. So we were really gratified that the students are feeling this way and that they got a lot of value from this community. That's it for slides. Let me stop sharing and let's talk. Questions, thoughts?
I just have a quick question. So you'd mentioned the tool Inscribe, and we've just started using it for some of our faculty development sessions. And, just curious from your perspective, how do you get students to actually participate, given that there's no points, right? Or there's no grade tied to it. So I'm just curious, what are some of your strategies for doing that?
Well, the idealistic piece of me will tell you this is intrinsic motivation. And honestly, I think it is, because we have never offered any extrinsic motivation model for students to participate. We basically told them it's here, it's for them. And I will tell you that when we first opened up this community, we set up a series of prompts, as topic prompts to give students an idea of the things to talk about. Like one of them was hello from home, one of them was I'm new here, one of them, various things, issues with technology, but students just dived in. We had a whole bunch of our online students, and I know you guys have a significant online population as well, but who basically said, I've been here this is my 4th year. I've never had an opportunity to connect and talk to anyone anybody, I'm from North Carolina. I'm from California. We had people come from Nepal and from all of our online students coming into the community and saying, I'm here. And the students saying, hey, you want to be my friend? And it was, it was just this amazing place for students to connect. So we never really needed to do that. As far as to answer, and I know that you're looking to do this as a faculty-based community. We are also looking to build. We're currently doing we're in Blackboard Ultra. They've introduced a bunch of AI course development tools, and so we've built a pilot project for faculty to get in and play with that. And so we created an Inscribe community for those to share what they're doing and their successes and their questions. And we're also looking to build a larger professional development student community for faculty.
Great, thank you.
Sure. And the nice thing about this community is, or the structure of the community is, you can customize this based upon who you want to have in there, what the needs of the community are. And it's not, it's not one set structure. It can be as informal and organic or as structured as you need it to be.
Going back to your belonging survey, is that data on undergraduate students, graduate students, a combination?
It is a combination.
I would love to see the breakdown, because I think there is definitely a difference of initiative between undergraduate and graduate. Considering, graduate students they might feel more connected because they're with the same students in their cohort throughout the program.
Right. And that's a great question. And I'm sure we parsed it out that way at some point. And I will find that information. I'll get it back to Jason. I'm writing this down.
And for those that are interested, I provided the case study in the chat room if you're interested in reading more about that.
I'm curious, are there any programs that are using Inscribe at the course level kind of to create community in individual courses?
Yes. Yeah, we're actually finding a number, based upon the success of the Tiger-2-Tiger community. There are faculty that are using it within their individual courses. There are also programs that are using it for their students to connect. College of Education has created a community for our student teachers that are out in the field to be able to use the community to share. There's a brand new online program in our speech language pathology department. And all of the students within this program are, while they may not all be taking the classes as a cohort, they're taking the program that way. And so they've created this a community for their students to talk to one another, share with one another, who are all in the same program. And these are programs that have just launched this fall. So a lot of people are seeing the value, not just in communities that are within communities, but different variations of around communities, which is a powerful piece. And it's something that hasn't been done that much.
So within that, in the larger community, you said you haven't really had issues with maybe having to monitor civil discourse. How much other kind of moderation needs to be done or is done in there? How much is it kind of like a space you're leaving students to their own questions and answering their own questions in accord, versus you have people who are assigned, or this is their main responsibility?
Well, that I'll start by saying when we began this community, we have a number of student workers in our group, and basically we assigned these student workers roles as moderator roles in the community. So to see what was going, this was very early on. And what we learned very early on was that everyone ignores moderators. And so they wouldn't talk with the students who were moderators. And so we downgraded them, or upgraded them in this case, to regular status, and so people would talk to them. One of the things that's built in, there's an AI component built into the Inscribed community, which will flag things that has, I guess, language that the AI thinks people ought to moderate and look at, and we'll look at things that are flagged. There was a couple of weeks ago, there was a student hating on their history class. But these things happen, and other students said, talked about it, but we're not going to ban those types of comments, because, these students on campus are having these conversations all the time, right, as they're walking around campus saying, man, can you believe what's happening in that course? And if we start to shut that down, we sort of lose the organic nature of the community. There was a very, very early on, the one comment I remember that I had some trouble with, and one of my student workers who was leaving said, should we take this comment down? This was middle of COVID. This was March or April of 2021. And somebody who obviously lived in town here posted, anybody going to Chuck's Friday night? Now, one of our student workers said, should we take this down? And I said, well, no, leave it there. And because, by and large, it was a comment pretty much everybody ignored, because most people probably realized that wasn't a good time to go to Chuck's. We also we've had a couple of faculty go into the community and try to engage the students. And much like our students, when they were moderators and being ignored, the faculty were ignored. I don't know if you know, but we speak a different language than our students do. And they know faculty speak when they see it. And the faculty went in. There's a very interesting philosophical question around the community that was summarily ignored.
What's participation rate? Like how many of your students are participating?
Well, currently, and I think I showed that on the slide earlier, we have close to 1,200 students active in the community at this point.
But how many do you have total? How many students? Out of how many students?
Well, for our online student population, we have just about 7,000.
Okay. And do also on-campus students participate?
Some do, yeah. It's we're finding, and I don't know if you're finding the same thing. We've even with our on-campus students, a lot of them would rather sign up for online courses these days. But we have, in terms of participation, I would say at this point that it's at least 80% are online students that are in the community. But that figure of close to 1,200 at this point, is, I think, a pretty healthy number, because we are not, as somebody suggested, in any way rewarding students extrinsically for their participation. This is something that they're doing. I mean, the number of responses that we had when we started this community from students saying, I've always wanted something like this. I've always wanted to be able to connect with other students, because this is not something, when your students are on campus and they're walking across campus and, they'll sometimes recognize someone they saw in class and they will go up to them and they will say hello and they'll talk to them because they've had that ability and because they're in the same space with them and they can see whether that person by their body language and posture and facial expression are open to saying hello. And there's this sense of trust that develops. But our online students, without all of those cues, are not necessarily going to reach out to one another. And we found by some of the surveys that we conducted post-COVID that they're not comfortable reaching out to one another on their own. Within this community structure, however, they feel this as a safe place, and then they reach out to one another because it is a safe place. And a lot of the early comments asking, will you be my friend? And I live in North Carolina. I'd love to be able to study with somebody. All of the stuff was happening within what we consider the safe environs of this community that we created that they would not do on their own, because that's it. You don't find online students emailing other online students out of the blue, even if they're in their own classes, because they don't have the cues available to think that somebody's going to reach back and that they're not going to get rejected. This community provides that safe environment for them, and they're taking advantage of it. It's really a wonderful thing to see.
Any other question? I see a comment in the chat there. A question from Jamie. Is there an online presence for Vols to Vols? Jason, I guess you just came up with that name on the spot.
It was just Andrew inspired me. It just came out from inside. There may be something. I don't know. That's where I kind of tagged Josh as on this in case. But I think, but I said anyways, we could maybe loop back with Jamie and talk about this, because I know that we have developments in the way, trying to figure out how to connect students to one another. We're starting with some Canvas shells that would connect together programs for online students to help with onboarding. We've got an undergrad online pedagogy group that's meeting to talk about strategies around this. And so I think we'll be having more conversation, and I think this is great information in terms of the success of this so far. Yeah, thank you.
Sure. Yeah, no, this has been, personally rewarding for me to be able to see this type of connection taking place and providing, our students who are, a lot of our online students, they've got busy lives, they've got families, and yet they feel disconnected from their coursework, and they are more likely to drop out, to quit, because they don't have the same type of support. And it can even be that, it may not be a specific student reaching out to another student. It may be a student just looking at other students having a conversation that's enough to let them know that they're not alone. And I think that's ultimately the power of this community is to be able to do that.
Yeah, I loved your examples. Thanks for those. Those were very, very moving and telling.
And that's for sure. And those aren't the only examples. They're grateful to be able to connect and to get that. We don't need to help connect our face-to-face students. We don't say to them, okay, when you leave class, here's what we would like you to do. We would like you to pair up and talk to, you know, that's not, they have an environment in which that's something that they can do if they want to do. When that Zoom shuts down, or even an asynchronous course that doesn't have any means for the students to directly connect ends, they're alone. And to be able to have a place where they can go without oversight and ask the same types of questions they would ask to one another if they were walking across quad or anything else, it provides them with a type of support that come natural for our face-to-face students. And we don't necessarily think about it because it's outside of our class. And we don't have to mediate it. We don't have to orchestrate it. But we do for our online students. We have to provide that space for them.
So I would like to thank you all for joining us here today. Thank you, Dr. Einstein, for a great presentation today. It was very informative. Thank you all again for being here. I hope everybody has a great weekend.